I'm Bryan Hyde, and I'm telling it like it is.
The potential of offending someone is so great when I talk about the Pledge of Allegiance, because it's something that most of us grew up with. I mean, it was a daily occurrence in most of our classrooms. And now, the Utah legislature has sent a bill to the governor, SB 223, that would mandate that the Pledge of Allegiance be said every day in every public school classroom in the state of Utah. On its surface, that seems like a really good idea. Again, most of us can we can do it with our eyes closed. We put our hand over our heart. We can say the words. We don't even think about it. And that's the problem that I have with the Pledge of Allegiance. We don't think about it. For instance, how many people can tell you where the Pledge of Allegiance came from? For most of us, we don't know. Somebody stands up and points out the flag. We put our hand over our hearts, and we start saying it by rote. Do you realize that it was written in 1892 by a man named Francis Bellamy? Now, this was done in conjunction with the 400th anniversary of Columbus Day. And the whole idea behind the Pledge of Allegiance was something that could be put to work in the public schools to help inculcate patriotism. In other words, it was to help develop a sense of patriotism among the students. Now, up until that time, in the Founders' generation and everything leading up to that, there really wasn't a need for an oath of loyalty. In fact, an oath of loyalty really didn't come onto the American scene until following the Civil War, in which case people in the southern states were required to take an oath of loyalty to the United States. So why would we do that daily for school kids? Well, let's take a look at the meaning of oath, or the meaning of allegiance. For instance, allegiance, one of the first definitions that you'll see in the dictionary, has to do with absolute obedience to your Lord. In other words, they're talking about the relationship between lords and serfs, and it's a master-servant relationship. That should raise a couple of red flags. Because is the state our servant, or is it our master? When we swear an oath, or when we take that oath, or we pledge allegiance to the state or to the flag that represents the state, what are we really pledging allegiance to? Secondly, do you realize that the history of the pledge wasn't always as cut and dried with hand over heart and feelings of patriotism as you might have once thought? Oh, the feelings of patriotism were probably there. But kids used to salute the flag in a very different way. It was called the Bellamy salute. It may look familiar. In fact, since World War II, nobody really likes to use the Bellamy salute. Even though that type of salute dates clear back to the ancient days of Rome, the Nazis kind of more or less ruined it for us. So I'm not trying to tear down your faith in the Pledge of Allegiance per se, but I'm asking you to question, why do we say the pledge? What exactly does it mean? And do you know the history of it? Above all, it was designed to build obedience and to remind people of their place in society, which, by the way, was actually one of the aims of the whole public school system in the first place. It was based on a Prussian model brought over in the mid-1800s by Horace Mann, who was the superintendent for public schools in Boston, Massachusetts. The Prussians were very good, very efficient at having an orderly society, and it's because everybody knew their place. And that's one of the functions that the Pledge of Allegiance serves in our society today. I'm not saying that you're unpatriotic when you say it. What I'm suggesting is most people don't think about what that pledge really means. In fact, if you really want to look at some different pledges, the book Animal Farm by George Orwell, published in 1946, the animals spoke and wrote, in other words, memorized exact wording to drown out the voices of opposition. I'm not saying that's what's happening, but look at where it leads. Now, you want to talk about another type of pledge? Consider the pledge made by the founders at the end of the Declaration of Independence, where they pledged their lives, their fortunes, their sacred honor. They weren't pledging allegiance just to a state. They were pledging allegiance to each other and, more importantly, to the cause of freedom. And it was a sincere pledge that obviously many of them acted on and paid the ultimate price for it. So the next time the flag is put up and hands go over hearts and the words of the pledge come to your lips, think about what you're saying. I'm not saying you shouldn't love your country. What I am suggesting is maybe the pledge you're saying doesn't represent everything that it could be representing. And when it comes to allegiance, I personally have my allegiance stacks up in this order: God, family, and then country. Think that over next time you say the pledge. And don't forget the Bellamy salute. I'm Bryan Hyde. I'm telling it like it is.